Good evening, everyone, and welcome in. Welcome in. Thanks for joining tonight on another episode of True Crime Chronicles Pursuit of Truth. Again, True Crime Chronicles Pursuit of Truth. Back here again with another episode. And tonight we're pursuing truth in the tragic death of 12-year-old Sarah June Niyimbona. Sorry if I'm saying her last name wrong, but Sarah June Niyimbona. We're going to call her Sarah, 12 years old. Take this full screen. We're gonna get into this very, very tragic situation here. Um, all right, again, welcome in, welcome in. Again, tonight we're focusing on the case of 12-year-old Sarah June Niyimbona. I know I may be pronouncing her last name wrong, so I'm just gonna call her Sarah moving forward. But I did want to put her full name out there, and it is on the screen as well. Here, right here on the screen is her name, Sarah June Niyimbona. We're gonna get into this very tragic event. Should not have happened, in my opinion. And just to get into it again, this baby was 12 years old. She committed suicide, unalived herself by jumping from the fourth floor of a parking structure while she was actually admitted to a hospital. She wasn't admitted to the psychiatric ward, but she was admitted to the hospital. And we're gonna get into this, and y'all gonna see why it's important what I'm saying about her being admitted. Again, this baby was 12 years old. She had been in and out of the hospital for psychiatric issues. She had her mom found out that she had been cutting herself. Self what we call self-harm. We're gonna refer to it as self. She had been doing self-harm by cutting herself on her arms and stuff. And she had hid it for a while from her mom, her sisters and brothers, from her family, and told she had hid it by wearing long sleeves, wearing scarves on her arms, telling her mom the scar was for fashion reasons. So mom didn't know that she was self-harming. Come to find, so her mom ended up discovering she was self-harming, took her to the hospital for treatment. Of course, the first time she was there, she wasn't there that long. Let's see. Is this the first? This is the very first, and the articles that we're looking at today, as you can see, is from journalists with Investigate West. Did very good job with detailing this, with covering this, provided a lot of information, did several interviews with her family. They've done several articles, and we're going to go through those articles to get the information from those different articles. So, what happened was, again, this baby mom found out she was self harming, started taking her to the hospital for treatment. Um, so, this is what happened with her, ending her life, and then I'm going to go backtrack once I go to those other articles. So, on April 13th, 2025, around 5:30 p.m. while she was in the hospital she was at was Providence Sacred Heart Medical Center. She was while she was at that hospital, she had been admitted. Um, she wasn't admitted to the psychiatric ward, but she had been admitted. And what she was admitted for, again, is because she had been self-harming and hurting herself. So her mom was doing what it was she was supposed to do, which was try to get her the help she needed to get her the psychiatric treatment, medications and all of that. So we know how mental health treatment is in our country. Everybody knows this. So with this baby being 12 years old, her mom was able to, I want to put her on the whole, no, put her in here, get her set up for long-term care treatment, get her admitted to a long-term care treatment facility. That's what her mom was attempting to do. Sorry, them lips was chapping. So her mom left, signed paperwork, said, okay, yeah, I want to admit her to the hospital, and then I want to try to work out the fine to get her admitted to a long term facility. And that was thing, and they knew this baby had been self-harming, had already several times before tried to end her life, tried to unalive herself. So they put security measures in place when she first got there. They had a sitter, which means they had it in place that there would be someone with her 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, watching her, because she had made statements also that she was going to jump out the window at the hospital. Like, she had made all types that she had cut herself with different items, took colored pencils and sharpened them up and broke them up and tried to cut herself. Like, she did multiple things. So when they put her in Providence Sacred Heart, they had measures in place to where they were supposed to be watching her to keep her from harming herself. But however, this baby, and she was in it, let's see, she had been receiving what they call intermittent treatment, psychiatric care for self-harm and suicide attempts at the hospital for at least 8 months prior to her unaliving herself. So the last admission to the hospital, her mom was in working with the hospital people trying to find a long-term facility to get her into where she could be admitted for a while. When they admit you for 30 or 60 days psychiatric treatment to get you on the right medications, get everything under control, get the correct diagnosis and everything, and stabilize you, and then say, okay, you're ready to go home. That's what her mom was working on trying to do. But the only thing she had been able to do so far was anytime she, caught her harming herself, or attempting to harm herself, would take her to the hospital or call the police and get her to the hospital. And this particular time, she was in the hospital. She had her room. She was, again, not at the long term, but she was at Sacred Heart, at Providence Sacred Heart. She was admitted. They had her in a room, put the measures in place. Like I said, they had a sitter. So basically, someone from the hospital was going to supposedly be sitting with her 24 hours, 7 days a week. If she needed to go in the bathroom, they would, walk her to the bathroom, watch everything, basically watch everything she did to make sure she wouldn't harm herself while she was there, waiting to be transferred to a long-term psychiatric treatment. However, the day did this, so what ended up happening on April 13th, there was no sitter with her. There was nobody sitting outside of her room or any of that. She ended up slipping out of the room. No alarms were triggered. She ended up leaving the pediatric floor and getting to the park, walked across what you call a crosswalk, what how the hospitals you can go from one side to another side. And she crossed one of those over to the parking garage, went to the fourth floor, and she jumped. She did not pass away on impact. So this baby hit the ground from the fourth floor, and she still was alive. She still was breathing. Because as they said on the 911 call, you could hear people talking to her. You could hear her moaning, like wheezing. You could hear her the breathing she was doing. She wasn't talking back to them, asking questions and things, but like I said, on the 911 call, they heard her wheezing, like taking breaths and stuff. Um, Ended up finally getting her transferred back to the hospital, to the ER, and she ended up passing away 2 hours later because she had sustained such horrific injuries when she jumped off of that fourth floor of that parking structure to the ground below. She sustained some very horrific injuries, and she ended up passing away 2 hours later. And so since this has happened, the hospital has said that they started a let's see. So the hospitals, Providence Sacred Heart in Providence, they haven't released anything to the public. They haven't released any statements or anything to the public. The only thing they've sent out when Investigate West reached out to them was, we extend our sympathy to the family and loved ones affected by this tragic situation. Providence refused to provide any additional information, citing privacy law. And this hospital actually had its own psychiatric unit for children and adolescents at one point, but they just closed it down. Let's see, 6 months ago. So they had their own unit where they can admit children and young adults for long-term care, but they closed it 6 months before this baby passed away. Um, they were trying to get funding for it, but there was just no funding there. And again, because mental health is not the top tier when it comes to getting funding for hospitals and all this in certain areas, excuse me. And so they were trying to get funding February of last year. They submitted a grant application to try to get some funding, but they didn't get it. And so so when they closed their own psychiatric facility, um any children that come there, they've been picked up by ambulance for self-harming or attempting to unalive themselves. They're sent to the emergency room, and then if they need to be admitted, they're admitted to the general pediatric floor, which is where Sarah was admitted to. She was admitted to the general pediatric floor, and like I said, she had people monitoring her. She was not supposed to be alone. They had to where she's supposed to have a sitter assigned to her 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And this is what it says. And then in this her and not only is her family speaking out and concerned about how this was able to happen, but you have some of the nurses that was involved in her care speaking out. And we're finna get deep into that about the care workers and stuff in a second. And see, and I didn't even see this at first. They said they also had a remote sitter. So basically, you had somebody that would sit in the room with her 24/7. You also had cameras in there, and the camera was monitoring her 24/7, and the person, and there was somebody at that camp. So if the person that couldn't physically be in the room, you had a backup person that was watching her through a camera, and they took that out of her room a couple of weeks prior to her unaliving herself as well. And then they said, so not only did they remove the camera 3 weeks before, the physical person that's supposed to be sitting in the room, they also removed them as well. Um, the in-person sitter. Literally days after they removed that person from her room, she unalived herself. And see this right here, this article right here was wrote Investigate Wiz wrote their first article on April the 20th, I want to say April 23rd, April 25th, like a week or so after she passed away. They wrote this first article, and they spoke to some nurses and some people that was in front of the pediatric unit, some nurses, and even the nurses were frustrated and upset because they did go and tell these people like, "Hey, this is dangerous to take these security measures away from her. She needs this. It's not safe. This baby is constantly telling y'all she's gonna harm herself. It's not safe to take away the security measures. Don't take away the sitter. Don't take the camera. If y'all gonna take one, don't take the other. But don't take both of them out and leave her just wide open with no security." The nurses tried to speak out. Um, and the hospital ain't really even speaking to the family, giving the family no answers either at all. And of course, they reasoning for not speaking out is because they conducting their own internal investigation to get to the root cause. The only thing we do know is the room number. She was in room 350. And see, and like And like I said, we're gonna dig deep into this because this was the very first article with Investigate West. They reached out to her family, interviewed her family, then they talked to some of the people at the hospital, the nurses that wanted to speak out, and they spoke out. And what they were saying, she was in her room, she was isolated. They had her in the basically the isolation room, so nobody was visiting her. Nobody was, the only person was in there was the sitter until they took the sitter out and took the cameras out. And the only thing she had access to was the TV. And then she didn't have access to the remote, so she couldn't change the channel on the TV. Um, she had a journal, and they said she was frustrated a lot and bored because literally they had her in a bare room with a bed and a TV. Um, no remote to change the TV, anything like that. And it took her color pencils and her remote because they said it was safety houses. Once they removed the sitter, they did put an alarm on her door, which would blare out and sound each time she opened her door to just ask for water, food, or anything like that. The bell alarm would go off, and even the staff member was like, "Is the way she was being treated was dehumanizing? Like they weren't treating her like she was a patient that needed specialized care. It was just pretty much so threw her in a room, a blank room, and said, just make sure she don't get out this room, make sure she don't harm herself. Was no compassion or anything behind it. So if you think about it, an adult, if you throw an adult in a situation like that, even an adult will get to a point where they're like, I just rather be like if you already think about this, if it's an adult, if they already in their mind saying, I no longer want to be alive, I have nothing to live for, and then you throw them in the room with a bare room with nothing and say all you get is a bed and a TV that's on one station 24/7. At some point they're gonna be like, what what's purpose? I might well unalive myself and I'll be out this room. They don't have to lock me in this room no more. Like it seems all type when you sitting in a room with nothing to do, nothing to occupy your mind, your space, nothing. So you just sitting there thinking and thinking all day. Of course, it makes it easier to have those thoughts going through your head of self-harming, unaliving yourself and stuff like that. And that's what the hospital staff was saying. It was dehumanizing because it wasn't the baby didn't have no type of human interaction aside from the sitter that had been sent to watch her and then the camera that was watching her. Excuse me. That was like she would get her food, she would get water, go to the bathroom, stuff like that. But it was very, very, very limited human interaction with this baby from is what I'm gathering. And also she would be the one to actually call the police a lot of times to say, hey, I want to harm myself. I want to unalive myself and get herself taken to the hospital in an ambulance. And she had been in and out of care for a minute, and it was just a cycle, ongoing cycle, because they never put it anywhere long term. And of course, the one long term place they tried to send her to was out of state, too far away to where the ambulance couldn't take her without it costing her arm and leg, and her mom had no way to get her if she couldn't go in the ambulance. So, and I'm gonna go to because it's another article that the investigation was did. They did multiple articles, Sarah. So the first one was from they did April 23rd. Then they came back May to talk about them investigating the hospital. So they came back on May 7th and they stated that the Washington Department of Health is investigating her death at the Providence Sacred Heart Medical Center. Um, and it's a lot of people were speaking out as far as, city council members, lawmakers, and even behavioral health advocates. A lot of people in the state was upset about it and was speaking out on this. Welcome in. I don't know. Okay, see if anybody's tuning in. It says someone is tuning in. Welcome in. Thank you for joining. Again, we're speaking of this on the tragic case of 12-year-old Sarah Niyimbona, who slipped out of Providence Sacred Heart pediatric floor and made her way unnoticed over to a parking structure, to their parking garage, and jumped from the fourth floor. And she ended up passing away 2 hours later from the injuries she sustained from that jump. Um, and where we're at now, we were speaking on, how it had been an ongoing cycle of her going to the hospital. They within a couple of hours send her back home, or within a couple of days send her back home. So she's stabilized, she's good. She no longer wants to harm herself. Send her back home to her family, and then before you know it, a few days later, she's back at the hospital again. It had been an ongoing cycle. So this time she had got admitted to a general pediatric floor because Providence Sacred Heart no longer had a psychiatric unit, a pediatric psychiatric unit. So there was no she wasn't on a psychiatric hold when she passed away. She was just admitted to the general pediatric floor while they were waiting to get her transferred to a psychiatric unit at a different hospital because Sacred Heart no longer had that unit at their hospital for children and adolescents. And as of May 7th, 2025, Providence Sacred Heart um was stating that they immediately had started an investigation, but also Washington Department of Health had also started an investigation at this point. And so nurses and everything had started getting interviewed in regards to what happened with the baby and why she no longer had the security measures in place that she had in place when she first was admitted to the pediatric floor. Okay, so this where everything takes a little of a turn of a twist. So after everybody started investigating and the nurses and stuff started speaking out in regards to what happened to this baby and saying it should not have happened, and that they warned the staff at the hospital before they removed all the security measures that it was not safe for them to remove everything. Because again, the baby had a sitter. So it was a person from the hospital who would sit in her room 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it wouldn't be the same person they was changing out, but it was always somebody physically in the room with her. And they also had a camera set up that somebody was monitoring remotely, monitoring the camera and watching her 24/7. So they removed the the camera, then they removed the sitter. Within days of them removing all her security measures, this baby was able to slip out her room, go across the hospital's crosswalk to the parking garage, and jump to her death from the fourth floor of the parking structure. Um, and of course, the nurses and the care team that was caring for her, they started speaking out. And this, like I said, this is where it takes the turn. And once those hospital staff people start speaking out, like those nurses start speaking out, this hospital fired 15 nurses. So basically, what it seemed like is they fired the whole nursing team from this pediatric unit for speaking out because they started speaking to like when Investigate West, when their journalists reached out to them, they were speaking out and they were saying how they were grieving for this baby and how they want the hospital that they needed the security measures in place, and how how they was advocating for mental health treatment and stuff like that. When them nurses spoke out, 15 of them got fired. And when they fired them, the reason they gave for terminating them was they violated HIPAA policy because they were saying that they went into charts without into her chart without being even part of her care team. But we're finna get to that because to me, firing 15 nurses and saying, "Oh, every single one of them was fired for HIPAA," I'm not buying it. You're not finna tell me you all 15 of these people went into this baby chart and they had no reason to. You had nurses that were working on her in the ER that night that access to a chart. You had nurses from the pediatric unit had access to a chart, and all of these nurses were fired. And it was put down they were fired for a HIPAA violation because they were saying they should not have been in her chart. But my thing is, the one lady, she admitted to being in the baby chart, and she said she wasn't on her team, her care team that night, but she was on her care team earlier. Like she wasn't on her team when she unalived herself, but she had been on her team in the days before, literally the 24 hours, less than 24 hours before she was a part of the care team. So she was like, let me check in her chart, make sure it's nothing I missed or nothing I did that could have prevented this. And that's all she did. She accessed the chart and she came back up out of it. And the thing of it is, I understand them saying there may have been a HIPAA because she wasn't on the care team at that time. But she was a part of the care team overall as a whole. And if y'all was investigating, of course these nurses are gonna want to go back, check their notes, see what was what. So I don't understand how I feel why all 15 of the nurses from this unit would be fired. And then y'all put it all down as HIPAA. But they did not get fired in the beginning. They didn't fire them until, let's go back to this because it's an article that speaks of it as well on here. So so before we get to, let's see. And see, this is why I say I don't believe they fired 15 nurses for a HIPAA violation, because this is the next article that came out by Investigate West on May the 16th. They were speaking about her committing suicide, and they were also speaking of the investigation that was ongoing by the Department of Health. And they states that Sarah was the fourth suicidal patient that the hospital had put at risk this year. Mind you, this investigation was done after she harmed herself, and they said she was the fourth person that they put at risk. Um, and they looked at review records, security footage, interview staff. Then they found that the hospital repeatedly violated statewide safety standards by failing to follow the policies um, for screening and supervision of the patient with suicidal ideation. So basically, what like they were saying, the security measures were not in place as far as supervision and keeping their eye on these patients the way they were supposed to. So and it's basically what the nurses came forward with is, hey, the security measures supposed to be in place to protect these patients is not being done. They faltering on it. And then that's where the firing came in at, because this article came out May the 16th. And within this article, we found out that within the state's findings, because the investigate Wiz got through public records request, and it showed Sacred Heart had a lot of missteps where it came to they're supposed to do a twice day screening with the patients as far as suicide or unaliving themselves. Probably twice a day where they go in, speak to them, how you feeling, what's your mood, are you feeling like harming yourself? There was something that's supposed to be doing twice a day with the people that had been expressing that they were suicidal when they were admitted. They were not doing it. Also left high risk patients unmonitored. So basically, she was the fourth person that they didn't have the proper monitoring. There were three other people who had suicidal ideations who were saying they were going to harm themselves. They were not monitored like they were supposed to be monitored. She was one out of four. Um, they said they had one patient who only missed one screening, but you had another who had missed 18, and Sarah, she had missed 64. So it was 92 screenings before been done. Out of 92, 64 of them they didn't do. And then you had another patient who had been hospitalized after they actually attempted suicide, and they were there 46 days, and not one time did they get any type of screening. So basically, within that time, they never went to that patient and said, "Are you feeling like harming yourself today? What's your mood today?" Ask the typical question they're supposed to ask. Out of 46 days, this person did get not one screening. They didn't sit down with this patient, not one time. This hospital was making big missteps. They was failing all the way around when it came to their psychiatric, where I can't even say psychiatric, their mental health patients that were there for mental health treatment. And their patient that was there, they were supposed to have one-on-one supervision, the same that Sarah had for the time that she had, to keep them from harming themselves. And they eliminated it and didn't document anything saying why they eliminated, why they removed the supervision. And they did issue a notice to the hospital on April 30th once the investigation concluded. And once they get that immediate jeopardy notification, that lets them know that there's a big deficiency in the hospital policies and stuff, and it could threaten patients' lives. The hospital could lose Medicare certification if they don't correct what they need to correct within a certain amount of time. Um, they submitted a corrective action plan, which basically like, hey, we're gonna do some training with our staff to remind them of the policies and what we're supposed to be doing. Um, do compliance training, had them sign a document saying they in compliance and they gonna comply. Um, However, the Department of Health said they investigation is gonna continue. They're not gonna close it out just because they got that. And then this was the statement that Providence, that um, the hospital spokesman wrote, sent out in the email. It said Providence implemented improved protocols and training, which includes screening all patients for potential suicide risk and responding to situations when patients go missing while hospitalized. End quote. And it's sad. And like I said, she had been receiving what you call intermittent care, which is basically, for self harm and suicidal thoughts. Um, she had been to an outpatient center, she had been to a psychiatric hospital, a group home, and then the hospital, where in the hospital is where she spent her final time at. And this is what I was saying about going to the emergency room and discharging her, and it was a cycle. Back in February, she was discharged, but she ended up returning to the emergency room just 2 hours later after they sent her home and said she was stabilized. She overdosed on some depression medication. So how stable could she have been if within 2 hours of going home, she was back in the hospital because she had tried to unalive herself? That's why they said them screenings is very necessary and it's very important because this baby discharged her 2 hours later. She was back because she had went home and attempted suicide. She swallowed depression medication. They weren't doing what they were supposed to do at this hospital. You can see it from the timeline of everything. And at this time, when she came back, they was like, she's at high risk. She's one of our patients that if we leave her alone, we don't keep an eye on her. She's at a high risk of harming herself because she's already tried multiple times. And the statement that they put was she must not be left alone. According to the policies that they have, the supposed the policies that they had in place and everything they saw with her, the comment in her chart said she must not be left alone. And see, and this where the staff started speaking out right here. This why I said this where the firemen came in at. Pediatric staff who asked for anonymity. I'm sorry. Pediatric staff who asked for anonymity for fear of losing their jobs told Investigate West they repeatedly raised concerns to hospital managers about the need for additional training and safety measures in the rooms, but were ignored. So basically, they closed down the psychiatric ward to the pediatric psychiatric ward. However, she was on the general pediatric ward, and they set up a couple of free rooms. That okay, if we get some children that need immediate attention, we got a few rooms. We can admit them as pediatric, and then they won't be admitted under psychiatric because we don't have the psychiatric, but we admit them on the general pediatric floor, and we have these free rooms set up to where if we need to admit them, they can get these rooms here. It wasn't a lot of rooms, but it was a few rooms, and that's what they set her up in, one of those rooms. But if the staff was stating, nobody was trained properly as to how this situation would go because they're on a regular pediatric floor and not a psychiatric floor. None of these are psychiatrists or anything like that. These are physicians and nurses that are trained regularly. So they brought it to the attention of the hospital, like, hey, there's some training needs to be done as to how we need to do this on this general pediatric floor when there is a psychiatric patient admitted to this floor because they require additional special treatment. We need to be trained on it. These staff members speaking out saying we were never trained properly for this. And so this where this comes in at about the firing. And then she kept through March and April, she kept cutting, hurting herself, doing whatever she could. She continued to self-harm. Excuse me, they documented 5 self-harm attempts in just 6 days. When she ran, and she actually had ran out of the room past the sitter and had made it to an elevator one of the times, and they stopped her and got her back in her room. At this point, this when they put the camera in her room for remote monitoring, so for backup. So now you got the physical person that's physically in there, and you also have a camera, another person that's remotely watching her. Again, after they did, she still tried to leave her room again and threatened to harm herself multiple times. 2 days later, she was caught trying to swallow plastic shot. Like she was trying, this baby was intent she was gonna harm herself. So this is the timeline of a lot of stuff that was going on. So throughout March and April, she continued to try to self harm herself. There were 5 attempts in just 6 days. Like I said, once she ran out the door and got to the elevator, another one on March the 17th, she tried again to leave her room and threatened to harm herself, but they got her back in the room. 2 days later, after that, she was in the shower. So, and I know they don't want to watch her while they shower, but when some in this instance, somebody like this, they should have been watching her. Not saying put the camera on her, but the person should have been making sure she didn't have nothing that she could harm herself with. But again, they wasn't, and she tried to swallow a plastic shower cap while she was in the shower. A week after that, she wrote a suicide plan that stated she was gonna make everyone think she was okay and not depressed. And she had listed multiple ways she could end her own life, including jump off a high bed. So she was telling them and doing things time and time again. She wrote this out, let them know I'm gonna jump from a building. April the 4th, they removed the camera from her room without doing any type of assessment or recommendation from any mental health people or anything. They just removed the camera. 4 days later, they took the sitter out of there. So now you got the remote monitoring gone. Then 4 days later, they takes out the sitter, the physical monitoring. So now there's nothing monitoring her. She's back in this room by herself again. Y'all see she had already got out the room with the person sitting in there and with the camera in there. But yet again, y'all said we're gonna take both of them away. We're gonna leave her to her own devices. Is what they did. And she had been having constant around the clock supervision for 5 weeks up until they removed all of that from her. And same thing with the other patient that attempted suicide who survived, who attempted to unalive themselves and survived. If you see here, they didn't supervise that patient correctly, and that patient was admitted into the intensive care unit after their attempt to unalive themselves. This person had no sitter for 3 days. The next morning, when the sitter was there, they was pulled out for other duties and was gone for 11 hours. A week later, after that, they counseled the sitter for no didn't give no reason. They just pulled the sitter from the room, and then that's when that person attempted suicide. And they said the day after they took the sitter from her room, she told the staff she was isolated and lonely. She was because she and again she was thrown in a room. Um, she didn't have a call light. She didn't have a remote for the television, and she barely had any belongings in there. She had the bed and the TV of free belongings, and that was it. Nothing that they thought she was gonna be able to harm herself with. 4 days after this, so basically 5 days after they removed the sitter, at 5:30 is when she left her room and left the floor. And she was gone for 4 minutes before they even noticed she was missing, according to what the investigators found. Then there was another 11 minutes that went by before they even issued a missing child. So y'all knew this is somebody that's got high, that's highly suicidal. They got high suicidal idealizations. Has been saying over and over, "I'm gonna take my life the first chance I get." Has told y'all this over and over. Has tried multiple times, and yet and still, when she disappeared, and y'all noticed after 4 minutes that she was gone, y'all still waited another 11 minutes. So she was gone 15 minutes before the missing child alert was put out. Y'all should immediately put some over the hospital thing and say, "Hey, we have a child. She's no longer in her room." Gave her a name and age and description right off the bat. When it's somebody that's suicidal, has these suicidal idealizations, it is at high risk of self harm. That should have been as soon as y'all noticed she was. When it took y'all 4 minutes to notice she was gone, at the fifth minute, y'all should have been putting an alert out. It shouldn't have been 15 whole minutes to pass. She left the room at 5:30. At 5:45 is when they went over the intercom at the hospital and said a 12-year-old female African American with braided hair wearing a teal top and purple pants is missing. Literally 1 minute later, after they did this, she walked onto the fourth floor of the parking garage. She was up there up until 6:03. Until she seen them look, the security look, they spotted her. And by the time they spotted her, I guess she must have noticed that they spotted her because she jumped at that point. And see, like they said, them delaying the notification even to security that she was missing. And the only thing they can say is they gonna make an effort to educate, so they're gonna train the workers on the missing child policy, which requires immediate notification to security. And it says staff are also required to check all hallways and exit within their own departments. And then, so basically, what they did is they decide, oh, we're gonna review our policies. We're gonna review the security policies and the missing child policy. We're gonna review our monitoring requirements and screenings. Make sure our nurses and everything is in compliance. Nothing was changed. It's just we're gonna make sure we review everything and make sure all of our workers have a better understanding of the policies. And so after this article right here came out, where they talked about the timeline and what happened, and they started interviewing staff at the hospital. This was back in May 16th when this article came out. Following this article, let's go to the next article because it got deep. So there was them investigating. This is what they said they endanger other people. This is the first one we did while I explained what happened. Now we come down here where we talk about the 15 nurses. Providence Sacred Heart fired 15 nurses in basically in retaliation for the news coverage of her suicide at that hospital. So basically, Investigate West was doing their investigation. They was releasing news articles, it was like about weekly or look like about a week or so. Every week or so, they would put out a new article. Once they gather more information, they would put out a new article. After the last article in May, by July 30th, let me see, when was it that they, let's see. Did it tell us when they got fired? So I don't know exactly when they got fired because they don't look like they give it to us in here. But what ended up happening is after Investigate West came out with the article where those staff members spoke out to them and gave their opinions and everything. They, like I said, they fired 15 nurses, were fired or disciplined on similar grounds. The hospital has not gave a count, but it says 15 they fired 15 nurses and disciplined another following news reports about the girl's suicide at the facility. So they fired 15 and they also disciplined some nurses as well. And they fired them after they spoke out and they were critical about how she was cared for and how different stuff was removed and stuff. They fired them. And these people went to their union, like, hey, because you got nurses unions and stuff out there like that for situations like this, because this is a retaliation. And this is what I was speaking on. They were saying that they violated HIPAA. It says some pediatric staff were critical of Sarah's care, telling investigative witnesses that her death would not have happened if she had been able to receive care in a specialized children's psychiatric center that Sacred Heart showed her just 6 months before. Instead, they say she was left unsupervised in an unlocked unit where both staff and rooms were ill-equipped to keep psychiatric patients, like Sarah said. In April, 3 employees spoke to investigative witnesses on the condition of anonymity for fear of losing their job. So they never gave anybody's name. And then this is what I was speaking of about accessing the chart. David Keep News, the association's executive director, said nurses outside of the emergency department are often called in to assist with the care and provide information related to a patient's treatment. We reject Providence Sacred Heart's claims that privacy was violated by nurses who were doing their job to assist in efforts to save the life of a 12-year-old girl in the hospital's care, he said in a statement. Nurses told the union that they were also asked by hospital officials whether they had provided information to reporters. So it seems like there was more than one, like Investigate West was doing a deep dive, but of course you had other media outlets like the local news and stuff was going up there and trying to speak to them or trying to get hold of anybody that had anything they wanted to add to this. Just like in a normal case, the media is gonna reach out for statements and stuff. So they started asking the nurses, have they spoken to any of the press or any media about her death? And it goes on to quote, many nurses say they feel targeted because of coverage of the suicide in the media, said unit spokesperson Ruth Schubert in an email. Nurses say managers have accused them of being spiteful and sneaky. Um, she told Investigate West she did care for Sarah nearly every shift for weeks and saw her just hours before she escaped her room. When the employee arrived at work the next day and was told Sarah had died, no additional information was provided, she said. Struggling to believe the news and concerned that the care she provided the previous day had played a role, she clicked into Sarah's chart, whose name still appeared on her list of patients for the day. So, boom, how can I violate HIPAA or violate privacy policies that I can't look at nobody's chart if when I come in the morning, y'all ain't took her out of the system, she's still listed as my patient. Technically, I have the right to go into her chart if she's still listed as my patient. I'm not violating anything by looking at her chart. Even if y'all already told me she's gone, when I click into my list and get ready for work and her name is there, I can click into her chart because I might need to notate she's no longer my patient since y'all have not notated. She had it right. So boom, I don't know why they reached out to her talking about she violated and she's already gone and was at another job. She says, quote, I think at the time I wasn't really thinking about patient privacy regulation. My patient just died. She said, I can acknowledge that, yeah, I probably shouldn't have been in her chart. But at the same time, I also felt like I should have known what happened because I was working with her so often. So she acknowledges, okay, I was not treating her at this time and they told me she passed. I acknowledged it, but I felt like I still need to go into her chart and just go over some stuff. She acknowledged it. She didn't hide the fact that she did. She was like, yeah, I did. I went on her chart, but it wasn't nothing malicious. It just was me glancing in here, checking all my notes and my records to make sure my stuff. Because obviously it's gonna be an investigation, even if she didn't reference that investigation or anything. Like she just said, I just wanted to make sure everything was in here. Look at what I had in there, what I notated and documented the night before, because I was just with her hours before all that happened. You know, and then the night that she passed away, the hospital email they sent out an alert informing staff that the child who went missing had been found and was being cared for in the hospital. The message warned staff not to post or comment on social media and not to access medical records unless they were part of her care team. It is not clear if all employees received their email, however. So basically, they put out an email alert to hospital workers saying, "Don't go on her chart. Don't post nothing about we had this happen at the hospital." So they was trying to cover. As you can see, this is a straight cover up. We can't speak on this. We can't comment to the media, no press. We can't get on our social media pages. We can't look at her chart. Like, and I understand not everybody hospital wide need to be on her chart. That's understandable. But you had, like this man said, you had people that were called in to assist. So they had to access her records and her chart. This particular nurse that gave her statement, they said, "I'm no longer there. I'm at a new job, and they're telling me I'm violating because I did go into her chart the night that she did this. Well, not the night, early the next morning. So she jumped at 6. She passed away around about 8 something. 'Cause they said 2 hours later. This nurse came in for her next shift a few hours after that. This baby was still listed on her chart on her list as one of her patients for that day, and she went into the chart. Okay, well, y'all still had her actively in the system as an active patient at this point. I don't see why this would mean this lady was doing anything as far as HIP is concerned. And so, and then also it's saying that it's not even clear that everybody even got the email or even the people that if everybody that got it actually looked at it. Because you got to remember they said this hospital wide, but a lot of people were on the clock. They were not on their phones checking their emails at that time. Some of the folks probably got the email and didn't even see the email for 2 days later. You never know when they saw it, if they saw it, like the man said. Um, a Providence Communication Director, Hams, or Hims, I don't know how you pronounce her last name, but Ali told Investigate Wiz that Providence takes potential privacy violations very seriously. She did not respond to the union's claim of retaliation. Then, quote, "We review employee conduct and take appropriate action, including termination of employment where warranted," she said in a statement. Patient privacy is one of our top priorities. To me, it does not look like protecting privacy. To me, it looked like they wanted to start this cover up because they knew these nurses and staff members had things to say about how this hospital was being, well, not in the hospital itself, but this pediatric floor was being ran, where the psychiatric care was concerned. They knew these staff members had concerns about that and they didn't want them putting nothing out in the media or anything like that. So the fact that some nurses spoke out, even if they did it anonymously on the anonymity, although they didn't give any names or anything like that, they spoke out. So in retaliation to that, they fired them. This was a whole cover up. It wasn't about nothing but cover up. Because in the, like I said, they can't anonymity, anonymous. I mean, basically, they didn't give no names or any identifying information. Just besides, I'm a nurse at Sacred Heart. That's all they gave. And the only thing investigate Wes described was basically the employees' concerns about the victim's care and about hold on, let me back up. The nurses union has filed a grievance against Sacred Heart seeking to reinstate fired nurses. Termination for a patient privacy violation disqualifies employees from being rehired by properties and, if reported to licensing authorities such as the Board of Nursing, can result in disciplinary action, including suspension or loss of their license. So basically, they fired them and said, put it in their record, they were fired for a privacy violation. So they can no longer work at properties, even if they get hired on another floor, try to apply for another position on a different unit, on a different floor, they can't go back there, period because they disqualified because they were terminated for a privacy violation. Then on top of that, it goes in their record. So if the nursing board sees that, the license authorities can say, okay, hey, you got a HIPAA violation, a privacy violation. They can suspend their license, or they can lose their license altogether for their privacy violation, depending on how bad the hospital is saying it was once they investigate. The article itself that Investigate West put out, it had the concerns in there that the employees had stated, the concerns that they had, and they spoke about. Investigate West put out their article on it. And their article is what triggered the investigation by the Washington Department of Health. So again, all this goes back to the employees, the nurses and stuff. They spoke out. The Department of Health said, "Okay, we're gonna step in and do an investigation." Immediately after the investigation got started, these nurses got fired. Y'all put two and two together. Because the math ain't mathing with the privacy violation stuff. It ain't mathing. But if you put two and two together from when that last article came out and when the Department of Health started investigating, put two and two together, I promise you the math will start adding up. And once the Department of Health did their investigation after the Investigate West article came out with all the employees speaking out, and in investigation, that's when they revealed that the hospital had violated state safety standards by failing to follow the policies and screenings and monitoring of the suicidal patients. And there was also some alarms raised in regards to the response, the delayed response after she had escaped the unit. It was very much delayed. It took 15 whole minutes for them to put any type of alert out in the hospital-wide alert out to say she was missed. And now her family is suing. So this gets us to our, let's see, hold on. So I want to make sure because I want to go in order. So yeah, I kind of went out of order a little bit. So now where we're at, after the Washington Department of Health conclude their investigation, made sure they had implemented changes and all of that, and it was put out by Investigate was like, hey, they've done the investigation and all of that. This family has also filed a lawsuit. They're suing. Her family is suing the hospital for negligence and medical malpractice. And the detail and from what this shows, it says the details and timeline spelled out in the lawsuit, it aligns, it matches up exactly to what her family and the hospital staff told Investigate with in the once they start their investigation and releasing their articles within the days after she passed away. And see, this goes into, this is basically saying her family has filed a lawsuit after the Department of Health launched their investigation um, and let the hospital know that they was out of compliance and could be putting patients' safety in jeopardy. Um, and again, they launched the Washington Department of Health launched their investigation after Investigate West came out with their investigation. And so right now the lawsuit is ongoing. Let's see, it says the lawsuit alleged that Providence and staff who were caring for Sarah violated Washington standard of care, the legal baseline against which healthcare providers are measured. So basically, right thing to do is tell me you going online, Right thing. Well, you was playing the game. So back to what I was saying. So basically, is in the lawsuit is writing is spelling it out like, hey, they were in violation of regulations and stuff like that. Um, they didn't have nothing in place to assure the safety of their psychiatric patients, mainly the ones on the pediatric floor. The pediatric psychiatric patients, the adolescent psychiatric patients, they have multiple violations that they were in. They were violating state policies. They had their policies. They didn't even abide by their own policy. That's what the lawsuit is alleged. This is the lawsuit also claims that Providence failed to adopt and follow adequate policies to care for months and keep safe youth experiencing mental health crisis. Now they didn't comment on exactly what they didn't answer specific questions about the specific standards. They didn't want to go into that. Because of course it's legal now, so you don't want to say too much and let the left hand, let the left side know what the right side. So basically, her lawyers and her, the family's lawyers and they're not gonna do too much more speaking at this point because now it's went legal. Now we take a legal action behind her passing away, and so they get to speaking too much and saying too much. The hospital can pick up on what they saying and stuff and use it against them in court. You got the right to remain silent because anything you say can and will be used against you in court. That's the right. So even in a civil case, you got a right to remain silent and not give up too much. Uh, and like I said, what they did when they closed their pediatric psychiatric unit, they converted a few rooms into psychiatric beds, but the rooms didn't have doors that locked, so the children could just get up and walk out because they didn't have any doors that the people can lock from the outside and lock them in. And then on to that, they took the monitoring system, the camera, and they took the physical person out of her room. So like, and that was the case, and this is the thing that I keep going back to. Why decide y'all gonna turn rooms on the pediatric floor into psychiatric rooms? There's no mental health physician there that's help running it. It's being run by nurses and general doctors because y'all don't have no mental health in y'all for pediatrics in y'all hospital no longer. So therefore, any mental health treatment that she needed was not going to be provided effectively because there was nobody there to provide it. So they just threw her in a room. You gonna sleep in this room for now until we figure out next steps. We're gonna monitor you with a camera, or we're gonna monitor you with a person, and then we taking this out of here. Now you just in the room with this TV in this bed. You ain't got no remote to change the TV, so the TV on one channel 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You don't even get a call button to call the nurse. And then the doors don't lock, so she can just get up and walk out the door anytime she get ready. Like if y'all were gonna convert them free rooms to psychiatric rooms on the general floor, y'all should have made some change. Like if y'all was gonna flip them to psychiatric rooms, y'all should have fully flipped them. So change those doors out, or put locks on, or whatever you need to do before you start admitting people to that unit, to that general pediatric unit up under psychiatric treatment because technically they was not getting psychiatric treatment on their floor for the pediatric and the adolescents. On their floor, you was on a general floor like you got admitted to the hospital because you was sick or something. Like how you admit somebody, a child, because they got RSV or pneumonia. That's how they was admitting them to that general floor for psychiatric help. But technically, they were not getting psychiatric help because it was not no longer offered there. So my thing, they should have been saying when they knew she needed inpatient, get in contact with another hospital somewhere that was close enough to where they can get her to it without her, so that her family, either her family go ahead and drive her, or they can transport her in the ambulance and then go. Since she's already admitted, and she's just being transported to another hospital. We won't charge the transport fee, or come up with a way, a compromise to get her transported from this hospital to the next hospital instead of putting it all on her family. It was up to her family to come up to figure out how they was going, if they were going to send her to the one hospital they found, the family was going to have to transport her. To me, it's just not fair, you know, for that to be put on the family. Let's see. Like, and it's just so upsetting that this happened to this baby. And you absolutely right, Colonel. They don't need to have no more psychiatric patients at this hospital, period. Period, point blank. They need to have no psychiatric patients at this hospital whatsoever. I absolutely agree with that one. 100%. 100%. If y'all ain't got the proper tools for this, do not admit patients under the guise of, oh, we admitting to the general unit. But she's a psychiatric patient. No, that's not the, if you admitted her to the general union, she was a general unit patient because nothing was in place to treat her as a psychiatric patient. And it leads to this baby passing away, to her jumping to her death from the fourth floor of y'all's parking structure. And then to fire these nurses, to terminate them and state, oh, they were terminated for a HIPAA violation. When in actually y'all terminated them for speaking out about the lackluster care y'all was providing at this hospital. It was a complete cover up. Let's say what it is. Y'all terminated them because y'all did not like what they were saying to the public. Even though y'all didn't know which nurses was talking, y'all terminate the whole team. 15 nurses y'all terminated because y'all couldn't determine who specifically it was that spoke out. So y'all just terminated the whole unit, the whole nursing unit. Oh, y'all gone, y'all fired. We're gonna make sure we get the right ones. We're gonna just terminate everybody. And the reason we're gonna give is that they violated HIPAA. And now it's lawsuits, and the nurses union is involved to get the nurses reinstated. Even if to reinstate them and then allow them to be able to transfer to a different hospital, that'll be something. Because right now they terminate these people, and their reason that they put out there, that prevents them from getting another nursing job, because they put in their file that they were terminated for a HIPAA violation. So this hospital taking multiple steps to cover up this baby's passing. They have not put out not one statement since this baby passed away, aside from sending the email to investigate West when their article came out. They sent the email that said it's tragic that she passed away, and it's our heartfelt condolences to her family. And we can't say no more. Y'all could have kept them two lines. That's all y'all was gonna say. Like I said, I feel like it's put two. I mean, y'all put two and two together, but clearly, to me, it was a cover up, and I'm gonna say that to the end. It's a cover. They covering this, like they didn't put no type of changes in place, or they submitted a report, a response to the investigation that the Department of Health did, and said, okay, we implemented some new policy, not implemented some new policies, I'm sorry. We retrained our staff on the policy and procedures, and made sure we are in compliance. Not we implemented anything new. We just went over the current policy with our staff to make sure they know what they should be doing, because we got a policy in place, but we just did a refresh on it. No, their policy is not working, baby. Y'all need to implement some changes to that policy. Like, do not admit no pediatric psychiatric patients to y'all hospital, period, because y'all can't accommodate them, y'all can't treat them, y'all ain't trained the staff on how to treat them. So stop admitting them. Because if y'all keep admitting these babies, these children, these adolescents, we're gonna keep having death. We already had one 12-year-old, she succeeded in her attempt, and you had another patient that attempted but was unsuccessful and was admitted to the hospital with bad injuries. So come on, stop admitting psychiatric patients to y'all hospital, because y'all don't have a psychiatric ward to admit them to, with the proper safety in place, and the proper staff to care for them. So do not admit them. Stop admitting. Either y'all, because if y'all want to keep admitting psychiatric people, y'all need to reopen the psychiatric wing to have the proper stuff in place. If not, if y'all not gonna open that wing back up, their unit back up. Stop admitting these pediatric psychiatric patients. Point blank, period. That's my take on it. Y'all to see her, this baby done passed away. She jumped to her death. And for one, from the beginning, when she disappeared, y'all didn't even handle it correct. It took 15 minutes for the security to put out an alert. It took you 4 minutes to even notify, even know she was gone and notify security. It took security 11 more minutes. So for a total of 15 minutes, this baby was missing, wandering through this hospital, getting to this parking structure. Y'all got to it, but it was too late. By the time the security even seen her, she was jumping because of delayed response. So all of it from the beginning, from the fact that y'all admitted her to a general pediatric unit where the nurses had no idea how to care for this baby. There was no staff on that floor that was specialized in pediatric psychiatric help. She shouldn't have been put on that floor, point blank, period. Then on top of that, not only did y'all do, they put her on that floor where nobody had been trained properly to help her and assist her and care for her. Then when she did finally, she was there, she tried to harm herself numerous times while she was admitted. So this how you know nobody was properly trained in the care that the specialized care that baby needed when she was admitted. Y'all should have told them parents from her mom and her family from the beginning. If we admit her, we don't have anybody trained that's properly trained to be able to give her the treatment that she needs. So admitting her to the general floor is still dangerous. Y'all should have made that known to her family from the beginning. Y'all made them think she was gonna be safe. If they admitted her to the general pediatric unit, she was gonna be safe. When y'all had no way of guaranteeing that because y'all knew this baby had already, and then when she got in there, she tried more time. She started writing letters telling y'all what her plan was, and y'all just did all that bypass. Like, come on now. Don't admit another person to their pediatric unit talking about their psychiatric patient because y'all don't have the tools or the proper staff or the proper training to treat pediatric psychiatric patients. So do not admit another one. You had one that attempted and almost succeeded, and one that did attempt and did succeed. They should tell y'all that what y'all got in place is not enough, and y'all don't need to meet no more psychiatric patients unless y'all gonna open up y'all unit back for a psychiatric patient and with specialized staff and security protocols in place. If y'all not gonna open it up, just stop it. And I'm gonna follow this because I hope this family get paid. And it's not about them getting no money. It's about the pain and suffering that baby went through for the time being she was there. The pain and suffering she went through when she passed away from jumping and passing away to the pain and suffering her family gonna go through for the rest of their life because they're gonna feel like it's a hole in their heart because their baby is no longer with them. 12 years old, life just gone at the age of 12. Life just gone. Because of the failures. And I'm gonna put it the failures of this hospital. Because it was failures on all it was failures. Even the Department of Health told them it was failures. They violated policies that were supposed to put in place to keep people safe. They failed. But I'm out of here. I've been over here on her over an hour. I'm out of here and went over everything. If anything comes of this, like any more details come out, and I'm gonna follow this lawsuit along, and now come back when they come back. If anything comes out, any more details, I'll come back with it. But rest in peace to this beautiful baby. Sleep in peace, beautiful girl. You were worth it. I'm sorry you didn't get the help that you needed, the proper help that you needed in time. And my condolences goes out to her, to Sarah's family. My heart goes out because losing a child, burying a child is something that no parent should have to do. And I'm just gonna leave it there. Burying a child is something that no parent should have to endure under no circumstances. My heart goes out to this girl's family, to this baby's family, because they're hurting. They're definitely hurting. From all the interviews that they did with Investigate West, they are hurting. Good night. I'm getting out of here. Thank you all for tuning in again on another episode of True Crime Chronicles, Pursuit of Truth, where we're pursuing the truth all the way through and through. And we're going to keep pursuing the truth. Catch y'all next time. Thanks for tuning in.